Okay, hello everyone. We're going to get started here. Welcome to our second debate forum of the 2019 through 2020 school year. Thank you very much for coming. Move away from the speaker so that it doesn't keep on making that noise. I have a few announcements to make before we get started. I just want to let everyone know who we are and what we're all about. With the UA debate series we began last year, we're trying to elevate the public discourse as best we can by hosting public forums about matters of public concern. Tonight, obviously, we're going to be discussing religion, as you can see from the resolution behind us. That said, I do want to make some announcements about the UA debate series itself. Right now, we have debaters who are in Tennessee at a tournament. They already won 4 trophies last night, and they are continuing to win even more today, apparently. So I want to give them a quick round of applause. Members of our organization end up getting credits for their internship towards graduation and get free travel to wherever that they want to go for their tournaments. So anybody's interested, we are also going to be open up applications for the spring in the next few weeks. So come and talk to me or any of our lovely interns to tell you exactly how it is that you can do that if you're interested. I also would like to encourage everyone to follow our social media pages. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram or on Facebook at UA Debate Series. It's a great way to find out where and when our new topics are going to be, where our forums are going to be, and most importantly, you can comment and let us know what topics you might be interested in seeing in the future, and we can take them into consideration, and we might be debating exactly what you suggested. I also want to announce our next public forum is going to be the first annual Regents Cup. ASU and NAU are going to be coming down here for a statewide tournament that we're hosting on November 16th. On November 16th, it's going to all be in McClellan Hall. You are more than welcome to come. It'll be an all-day event, but our very, very final round is going to be open to the public in Berger Auditorium. We're really looking forward to that, and we want to make sure we have a lot of school spirit coming out to support our U of A debaters. So please come out and help us beat ASU and NAU. Just kidding. It's all in good fun. But seriously, we want to beat them. So that said, I do also want to point out that we have a raffle. Hopefully everyone picked up tickets before you came in. We will be announcing the winners of the raffle at the end before we announce the winners of the debate, and you will win a free Starbucks gift card when you do that. And finally, I do also want to point out some thank yous that are very important. I want to thank first and foremost Dane Velasquez, who comes and videotapes all of our events just out of the goodness of his own heart. So big applause for him. To the College of SBS and the Provost, who ended up giving us a whole lot of funding, which is one of the reasons why our students are allowed to travel for free around the country. So a big thank you to them. A thank you to Susan Miller-Cochran, who runs the writing program, who also gave us some generous funding and has been a great supporter of our program. To Oliver Kammeyer, who is our grant writer. There's a lot of people who give us money, and he's helping us out with future grants. I want to thank our Santa Clara debaters who came here all the way from California. Please, thank you very much to them. To Alex Rentz, Karina, Mason Halder, and Diego Pedreas, thank you very much, all of you, for coming. And finally, to our departments, our interns, who just make all of these events so great. We have our events planning department, our marketing, promotion, and outreach department, our research department, our education department, and our finance department, by which I mean Sam. So thank you to all of our interns for being fantastic and supporting us and always doing such a great job. That said, I want to just explain the voting system to you right now, and our intern Marnie is going to come up and talk to you about how that whole entire thing works. But just in case any of you are new to this style of debate, what we're going to do is we're going to have you vote before the debate, before you hear any of our interns' arguments. And then we're going to have you vote after the debate, and whoever ends up swaying the audience the most ends up being declared the winner, rather than people, whichever side ended up getting the most votes, period. So in order to do that, Marnie's going to teach you how to use the voting system so that we can get an accurate count. Thank you, Marnie.
Hi, guys. Okay, so has everyone used Kahoot? Whoa. Okay, so just pull out your phones and type in kahoot.it. Or computers or anything connected to Wi-Fi. And then when you do that, the code is on the board, but I'll also read it out loud a little bit. It's 518600. Again, 518600. And if you need help, just raise your hand. Okay, cool. And then on the board, there's also what each shape means. So the triangle means affirmative, the diamond means negative, and the circle means undecided. And Daniel, if you can flip back to the first screen, that's the prompt. Does everyone see the voting?
Could you repeat the name of the website?
Oh, kahoot.it.
K-A-H-O-T.
Yeah. Anyone else having problems? Okay, anyone need anything repeated? Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much. And that said, I'm going to hand the actual rounds of our debate over to our moderator for the evening, Daniel.
Hello, everyone. Am I coming through okay? I would like to once again thank everyone for coming out here tonight, both people coming to see the debate and for our lovely debaters all the way from California. Once again, another round of applause for them. As we begin, some brief background on our topic. Back in the 14th and 15th centuries, there were church councils who attempted to ban certain banking systems, citing them as examples of usury, which was condemned by the Bible. When Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species in 1859, it was universally disavowed by the church. And again in 1914, when Margaret Sanger launched a campaign to promote birth control and family planning, the church vehemently opposed it. Now, over the course of the debate, we will not simply be examining the impact of a single Judeo-Christian faith, but of religion as a whole. However, these examples do allow us to prompt the question which has brought us here tonight. Does religion obstruct human progress? The debate will be over 3 different phases. Phase 1 will be opening statements, which will go back and forth from the affirmative to negative. Each debater will have 6 minutes to make their opening, in which case we'll move to the other side. Starting off with the affirmative, if I could welcome Emily Chrysanthus to the stage.
Hello. Thank you all in the audience for being here today, and thank you to the debate team of Santa Clara for coming here to Arizona. It is our pleasure to host this debate. What is human progress, and how does it relate to religion? We on the affirmative have defined human progress as the advancement toward a more complete and modern condition with increased general well-being. However, throughout history, religion has obstructed progress, meaning that progress was intentionally or unintentionally impeded on. But before I continue, I must make it clear that we are focusing on religious systems and their ideologies, not religious individuals. This is because religious systems rarely promote autonomy, whereas individuals practicing a faith may have more freedom and less influence. We agree that faith can be a positive aspect in many people's daily lives, giving comfort and community. Additionally, we believe that religion has had some positive influences. However, we believe that the negative consequences that religious systems have incurred are far greater than the benefits. So, you may be wondering, how can we make this argument that religion obstructs human progress? I know it seems bold, but it's not. On balance, when all things have been weighed, religion has gotten in the way of human progress more than it has promoted it. We have chosen to interpret the motion in this manner because what is the point of having this debate if overall the net impact of religious systems isn't taken into consideration? My opponents may try to convince you that because religion has furthered human progress in certain instances, that religion does not obstruct human progress, or they may say that individuals' misuse of religion is what has obstructed human progress, not religion itself. But we are not here to discuss simply the concept of religion. We are here to discuss how religion functions in the real, tangible world, and how, when all things have been considered, religion has obstructed human progress more than it has not. The first thing to come to my mind in this debate was religion's subjugation of women, but my colleague Akash will address that shortly. So I will begin with religion's evident discouragement of moral inquiry. Many of you in the audience already know that the major religions such as Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism all have scriptures that are to be referred to in times of doubt or to find answers to life's questions. Sure, people can sometimes do their own studies, but ultimately, if the research does not come to the same conclusions as those in the scriptures, they may face backlash from their communities or be deemed less of a follower of their faith. Inquiry in religion is often not done to broaden perspectives, but to pull the person deeper into their religion. But before I go any further, I'd like to explain why I mentioned Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. These are the three most practiced religions globally, with a combined total of about 5.2 billion followers, according to the Pew Research Center as of 2015. That is over half of the world population. Yes, thousands of religions do exist, but what would be the point in having this debate if we don't focus on the ones with the most influence? So what about the people who don't believe at all? In 1452, for example, the Catholic Church issued the papal bull which stated, "We grant you, kings of Spain and Portugal, by these present documents with our apostolic authority, full and free permission to invade, search out, capture, and subjugate the Saracens and pagans and any other non-believers and enemies of Christ, wherever they may be, as well as their kingdoms, duchies, counties, principalities, and other property, and to reduce their persons into perpetual servitude." Essentially, this document by the Catholic Church permitted and supported the conquest and enslavement of non-believers and pagans. This ideology of us versus them and lack of willingness to understand others' beliefs is a consistent theme in many of the world's major religions, with the genocides in the Americas during European colonization, European imperialism in Asia and Africa, slavery, the conflict between Islamic Pakistan and Hindu India, Islamic honor killings. The list could go on, and I expect that you are already familiar with the majority of the examples I just mentioned. All of these awful things are due largely to religious institutions often promoting narrow-mindedness and discouraging the understanding of beliefs that do not coincide with the scriptures, a true discouragement of moral inquiry. But it doesn't stop there. Without a promotion of moral inquiry, free speech is inevitably hindered. And without free speech, there is less room for moral inquiry. It is a vicious cycle. Hence why heresy, a belief or opinion contrary to orthodox religious doctrine, has historically been punishable by death, and even into the current is still a serious offense in some countries. For example, in Islamic Saudi Arabia and Iran, apostasy, the abandonment or renunciation of a religious or political belief, can be punishable by death in the 21st century. But not only have religious institutions discouraged moral inquiry, but they have also impeded on scientific advancement, namely by hindering with scientific methodology. For example, in 1633, Galileo was ordered to stand trial on suspicion of heresy for holding as true the false doctrine taught by some that the sun is the center of the world. He was given an injunction by the Holy Office to abandon this doctrine, to not teach it to others, not to defend it, and not to treat of it, and that if he did acquiesce in this injunction, he was to be imprisoned. Galileo was interrogated while threatened with physical torture and was ultimately found guilty. Now, in modern times, we all know that the Earth revolves around the sun, but don't you think this might have been common knowledge sooner had the idea not been so ardently opposed by the Church? Religion is based on faith, and there's almost no incentive for religious systems to do scientific research because they already have the answers to life's questions in their scriptures. Sure, religious institutions have made some strides in medical research, but that is only one area of science and doesn't outweigh religion's general conflict with it. Thank you for listening. Please vote affirmative.
And thank you very much, Emily. I apologize for not mentioning it earlier, but when you have 30 seconds left, I will be giving a slight knock for you to look out for. Following, if not, we will move to the first opening statement for the negative side of the debate. If I could welcome our first debater from Santa Clara, Alex Rentz.
Before I begin, I want to say thank you to everybody, and thanks to University of Arizona for having us. It's been great. It looks great in here. Thank you guys, too. Okay, I'm going to begin starting off with our own constructive arguments, and I'm going to allow my partners to respond to their arguments in our second speech. I want to begin with a quote from Albert Einstein where he says, "Science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind," and that sort of embodies a message that we ourselves value as well. So I think it's important also to start out with a definition of what is religion, as our opponents did. It's hard to pin down a single definition because it materializes in so many different ways, right? but its fundamental characteristics include things like having a moral framework, belief in a supernatural element, and a community based around these sort of values. It's also important to ask ourselves, what is human progress? Again, it's difficult to answer because of its subjective nature, but the important thing to recognize is that it's comprehensive and that it includes things like social, economic, moral, political, technological progress, a variety of things. So our first main argument is that religion is fundamental to human existence and evolves to match our current needs. Now, when I initially read this resolution, what came to mind was the effect of religion on individual human progress. Neuroscientist Andrew Newberg studies the effect of religion on the brain and demonstrates how belief in God actually has tangible effects on human brain chemistry. Some of his findings include how participating in religious rituals evokes profound emotional responses, how religious beliefs help us process the death of loved ones, how religious dogma has allowed theology to improve art, architecture, and philosophical writing. Clearly, religion has had significant effects that promote the growth of the individual. Newberg also concluded from the studies that spiritual experience seemed to be an inescapable part of human existence and clearly appear in all cultures, not just the religions that are organized today. In 2015, the Pew Research Center modeled the future of the world's great religions and predicted a modest increase in believers in the coming decades. So why do spiritual people, but not necessarily religious behaviors, still continue in modern society? Well, for one, it seems to provide us with some sort of moral compass. It motivates us to treat others with compassion, has a message of forgiveness, promotes inner strength, promotes creative expression, music, art, and also importantly, people have a biological need for community. Belonging to a tight-knit group of people that we can trust is a fundamental method for survival, and religion provides this outlet. The purpose of religion is to fulfill these goals. It's been pretty flexible in doing so. New growing movements such as climatology, dataism, and transhumanism prove that the definition of religion is ever evolving. Social change also undermines religions which don't accommodate it. Earlier in this year, Pope Francis warned that if the Catholic Church didn't acknowledge its history of male domination and sexual abuse, it risked becoming a museum. So to conclude, I want to ask, what would happen if we were to get rid of religion from society? Well, human behavior experts would say any framework we were to develop, a certain moral outlook, is bound to produce its own list of principles, prophets, and devoted followers. In other words, it'd be indistinguishable from how we see religion today. My second argument is about how religion is the source of basic human rights, that the idea of universal human rights didn't appear out of nowhere and into the heads of enlightened intellectuals. In part, it was largely an outgrowth of Judeo-Christian theology and principles, and we can see a lot of that in modern democracies. Judeo-Christian refers to an ethical value system common to Jews and Christians, and it's deeply rooted in both religions' texts. In the ancient world, you were what you were born. So if you were born an aristocrat, a noble, a serf, you generally stayed that way. However, the Torah's laws worked to change and create a society that empowers equality, even at an economic level, and make people more egalitarian with stuff like debt cancellation and taxes. Now, how have these affected the formation of democracy? Well, in Greece, which was started the founding of democracy, fundamental principles like representation in government and judgment by peers came from the Greeks, who had these sort of political arrangements very much influenced by their belief about God. And in the United States, we can see how our basis of liberty came in part from the founding fathers recognizing that religion and morality are an indispensable support to political prosperity. Our basis of equality is written throughout Jewish and Christian texts in references to equality such as ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. And then our God-given rights that we see in the Constitution as well can be even traced back, and even the separation of church and state can be traced back to messages found in religious texts. The point is that basic human rights and the fundamentals of social justice began with these religious texts. And religion is the core platform from which all this justice was able to grow. Now, our third argument is that religion promotes social support, which creates progress. Religious communities are particularly charitable, and studies show that congregational involvement in private devotional activities significantly predict social support, like loaning money, caring for the sick, and helping neighbors find a job. In fact, religious people are twice as likely to give to charity than non-religious people. Religion also promotes community health and education, creates institutions that promote health, emphasis of social justice, and safeguarding of vulnerable populations, like hospitals, surgery, hygiene, proper administration, hundreds of thousands of schools, hospitals, and other clinics. And then a historical example is Martin Luther in terms of education, who was able to help literacy rates rise in Europe by teaching people how to read the Bible. So for these three reasons: one, the basic inherency of religion toward human existence and its capability to evolve; two, its contribution toward the formation of human rights; and three, its dedication toward supporting the marginalized, we demonstrate that religion is not a disruption of progress, but rather an essential complement that promotes individual and large-scale growth.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you again. Insightful points. We will now be moving on to the second opening speech for the affirmative side. If I can welcome to the stage, Akash Sutpate.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is so lovely to see you all here. I'll first give my statements and followed by a rebuttal, and then my partner will continue. In a brief moment, I shall talk about how religion has oppressed women, but before I begin, I understand why you might have voted for the other side. After all, religion is such an essential part of many of your lives. It might be a source of hope and inner peace, or part of your identity and culture. Let me read you this seemingly extremist quote. The belief that women are inferior human beings in the eyes of God gives excuses to the brutal husband who beats his wife, the soldier who rapes a woman, the employer who has a lower pay scale for women employees, or parents who decide to abort the female embryo. Outrageous, isn't it? You will be surprised that these aren't the words of a firebrand atheist, but that of a God-fearing Christian, Jimmy Carter, the 39th President of the United States. Now, what would make a devout Southern Baptist stand in the Parliament of World's Religions and decry the religious oppression of women? The fact is that religion has shaped society for millennia now. And they have shaped it the same way they have shaped their churches, their synagogues, their temples, and their mosques. I must ask, where are the female popes? Where are the female priests, the female imams? Is it surprising that they are categorically denied to hold any position of power? The denial of power to women stems from the denial of equal status. For the longest time in history, the answer to, are women equal to men, has been a resounding no. In his letter to Timothy, Paul the Apostle declares, I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. The 13th century Christian philosopher Thomas Aquinas called women anomalous males. Some of you may rightly ask, are such age-old examples still relevant? Well, ideas voiced by prominent religious figures last for ages. Research and reports from University of Vermont, University of Prague, and the United Nations independently confirm that states and countries with a higher rate of religiosity tend to be disadvantageous for women. Women in these societies have low rates of education, economic opportunities, sexual freedom, and they face high rates of discrimination and abuse. In secular Western democracies such as the US, even though problems still exist, we have come a long way. However, we must not turn a blind eye to history. We must not turn a blind eye to nations across the pond, nations in the Middle East and North Africa where 40 million little girls are married away in the name of religion, to nations in Asia like India and Pakistan where women are subject to religiously motivated honor killings, acid attacks, mutilations, and domestic violence. The truth is that for thousands of years, religious ideologies and institutions have oppressed and silenced 50% of the human population. They have denied the 50% from obtaining equivalent education to that of men. They have ensured that 50% remain trapped in the chain of reproduction and have significantly restricted their individual rights and freedom. Now, I ask you, can we deny that the single biggest assault on human progress has to be the absolute subjugation of women? and that the iron hammer of religion is majorly responsible for it. Now, my opponents adversaries seem to think that this is not the case. They seem to turn a blind eye to history. They're focusing on facts, neuroscientific facts on how religion might affect society. And I agree to some of them, that religion does give us a sense of community. It does help us get together and pray and all of that. However, we have seen what happens when people come together and they say, they form their ideology of us versus them. We can take the example of Ireland, where the Catholics were butchering the Protestants. I mean, I'm sure the Catholics had a sense of community, but they didn't use it nicely, did they? Then my adversary makes a rather bold claim that we cannot have a moral compass without religion, that it is a source of moral compass. Well, yes, it is, but it is just absurd to say that someone who's not religious cannot be good, cannot distinguish bad from good. Like, if you see a small child, if a small child sees a puppy, for example, right, like 1 year old, he doesn't have any sense of religion. He's not a Christian or Buddhist. Well, his parents might be. But when he sees a puppy, his instinctive reaction is not to choke the puppy to death, but rather to play with it. This shows us that there's something instinctive about morality. That we can establish morality without scripture, without age-old books like the Bible or the Quran. Then my opponent also makes the claim that if we should get rid of religion, or poses a hypothesis based on if we should get rid of religion, but nobody on our side is proposing that we should get rid of religion. In fact, we are saying that we believe in the separation of church and state, we believe in the right to freedom of belief. So I don't think that's even a valid claim. Like, I'm not going to debate that. Now, the other. Well, I don't have much time, but my partner will continue with the criticism. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much again. Now we'll move on again to the second portion of the opening for our guests. If I may, welcome to the stage, Diego Pedreas.
Is everyone ready? So I'm going to begin my speech and mainly just focus across the affirmatives claims and just go line by line, specifically addressing the subjugation of women and their moral inquiry argument, and then let Corinna further our specific arguments. So first, the affirmative side claims that the subjugation of women is pretty uniquely a religious issue that is affected and has affected our world for the last, centuries that have come beforehand. However, an unfortunate reality that we have to accept is that a world without religion is a world that still has sexism and patriarchy. Religion is not uniquely responsible for the sexism that exists within our world. Take, for example, the status quo in the United States today. As the affirmative cedes that the United States is a secular country, however, we elected a president that says derogatory claims towards women every single day, and we still chose to elect him. This president, devoid of really any religious ties or any ties that the Republican Party could claim that he is actually fulfilling, still is an example of how a world without religion is a world that still has sexism and patriarchy. And now I'm going to cite some specific ways how religion actually furthers women's rights. So historically, women have not been able to get an education, meaning that a world without religion still would have had hindrances to women's education and women's involvement in the academic world. Women have specific Christian universities that further education. In addition, Many women who suffer from domestic abuse are able to find a community that they can often not find within their places of worship. Churches, mosques, temples, and synagogues accept women in these faith communities, and they're actually predominantly female. To add on, there are many charity groups that are also religious that further women's groups. And then finally, by simply attending services, women can actually reduce their cancer and cardiovascular mortality rates. They can improve their mental health, and it can help women process domestic abuse and other forms of sexism in a community of support. The affirmative side also cites how women have been devoid of educational, sex, and voting rights due to religion. However, again, this is not uniquely a religious issue. If we are debating the topic today that religion obstructs human progress, without religion, there would still be obstructions to women's rights. Let me remind you that the United States, a supposedly secular country, only gave women the right to vote in the late 20th century. And then in addition, my opponent goes on to say that atheists are still able to frame or to create moral frameworks. However, when we go about this issue, we have to ask ourselves, does science have the answer to morality? Maybe, but probably not. Science isn't in the business of telling us normative statements, the should and should nots. Science tells us the facts. And a world without religion wouldn't have moral frameworks. However, as Corinna will go into, we argue that religion is an inevitable part of the human experience, and even if we rid the world of religion today, we would still create a world that has moral frameworks, institutions that put those in place, people that further that, and inevitably, a religion would once again rise up. Now I'm going to respond to their second argument, and a little bit of their first argument again, when they talk about the us versus them mentality. So, the affirmative side argues that the subjugation of women and religious institutions are often characterized in an us versus them mindset. However, let me remind you that conflict is inevitable as humans otherize those who do not look like, think like, and worship like them. This is rooted in a primal tendency explained as tribalism. When humans were in tribes, they protected people that looked like them or within their own tribe and were hardwired biologically to not want to associate themselves and often hate those who didn't look like them. If we believe religion is at fault, then what do we say the same about race, class, political affiliation, and sexual or gender identities? These are all issues that have rampant conflicts today in the political, social, and economic world. However, we wouldn't say that race is at fault for racial conflicts. We wouldn't say that class is at fault for classist conflicts. We wouldn't say that politics is at fault for political conflicts. These characteristics make us unique and different, but not inherently worse. If anything, in an era which has just begun to celebrate diversity, it seems antithetical to blame indicators of diversity, such as religion, inherently bad without looking at the root drivers of otherization, human biology. The affirmative world is a slippery slope to a homogeneous population which lacks culture, race, religion, and other characteristics that make us different. Clearly, the affirmative chooses to take a step backward away from religious toleration by blaming religion as the driver of conflict instead of celebrating our differences to which benefit education and enlightenment towards a world, and then push us towards a world which lacks any meaningful progress in accepting our differences. Thank you.
And thank you once again, Diego. We will now be moving to the third and final opening speeches from both of our sides. So if I can, once again, welcome to the stage. We will have Finley Dutton-Reed for the affirmative.
I want to start by thanking you all for being here. I think this is an important topic to talk about. And so before I address my opponent's points, I'm going to reiterate our own points just to clarify them. So first, we have our framework. And we're thinking on balance. So has religion, over the course of history, over the entire world, helped or hurt human progress more or less? And we agree with our opponents on the definition of religion. It's just systems of organization of beliefs. And we have emphasized that we should be looking at major religions because they've had the biggest impact on the most people throughout history. That makes sense. And we have three main points. The first is the limitations on moral inquiry. We're not saying that there are no questions in religion. What we are saying is that some things are not questionable by religions. Some truths are sacrosanct. You can't question them. And this is very problematic. We are also saying that religions have limited free speech. Heresy, punishable by death. We need to be able to be asking moral questions to answer them. We're not saying we have all the answers to these moral questions, but we are saying that we have to be asking these questions, and religion limits how you can ask these questions. Second, the impact on the scientific method. The scientific method is a process of inquiry that is not based on faith. It is antithetical to religious thinking. And it is important for the evolution of society, technology, and social systems. There is a reason that the Catholic Church is more conservative than society at large. It is because it is behind society. It is society that is pulling the Catholic Church forward, and the Catholic Church, for example, that is pulling society back and hindering its progress. And third, we've talked about the oppression of women. The lack of women in power throughout all major religions is very concerning. And we've also talked about how sexism is institutionalized within these religions in the way that women are taught. I'm going to get to this when I speak about my opponent's education of women. They're socialized very differently than men throughout history in religious contexts. But I'm first going to defend our case. So, our opponents began on our first point by saying that if you have no religion, you can't have moral frameworks. This is simply untrue. We can look to philosophers like Rawls and Kant, who put forward moral frameworks that are completely absent of religious thinking within them. And so this claim is untrue. Our opponents also say that conflict is inevitable. But this is not acknowledging that religion furthers conflict. We acknowledge that there are other problems in the world, other things that are hindering human progress, like nationalism, tribalism, racism. But we're saying that religion is a convenient excuse for those in power to tell you to go kill someone else or create an in-and-out group. The less in-and-out groups we have, the more progress that we can make. Our opponents use the example as politics as not at fault for political problems. But I think it's more political systems. Would you rather live in a dictatorship or a democracy? In a dictatorship, the incentives are aligned without checks and balances. And this is going to lead to serious abuses of power. The same is true in religious institutions. It is a top-down power structure. One person is ordained by God, for example, the Pope, to tell us all what is enlightened, what is true, what is false. They don't have checks on their power in the same way that a democratic institution does. Second, moving on to our second point, and talking about the oppression of women. I understand that it's not unique. There are many systems that oppress women. And our opponents talk about the United States. It is undeniable that the history of the United States is rooted in Christianity, and that Christian principles are sexist in many, many ways. There are no priests that are female. And we can see that religion holds back progress. There is a reason that, again, the Catholic Church is less progressive towards women than society at large. It's because, again, society is pulling the Catholic Church forward, not the other way around. My opponent talks about how it is actually the opposite, that in fact, religious institutions have allowed for the education of women. And I just have two responses to this. First, they are educated differently than men throughout all of history. They are socialized differently. For many religions, the number one way to get converts was to have more babies, which means that women were socialized to be baby machines. They were socialized to be only mothers. And I'm not saying that motherhood is bad, motherhood is good, but it should be the woman's choice, not the society that she is socialized within. And the second point is historically. Our opponents bring up a lot of points about modern day things that they think are positive. but throughout history, there's been an even greater degree of sexism from religion. So moving on to our opponent's points. I think it's interesting they brought up Albert Einstein, because it's also important to acknowledge that religion can be used by those in power to blind everyone else. And I think that religion being used as a tool, it's very important to understand that that is the incentives that are aligned. It's a top-down power structure. It can be used as an excuse. Our opponents say that society and religion evolve together. The religions evolve to society. But it slows progress. I really want you to understand that there's a reason that any time you look at a religion and society at large, the religion is more conservative. It is less progressive than society at large. And that is because it is slowing it down. So it is not our advocacy that we should get rid of religion. And again, human rights can be determined by other things besides religion. There are many Enlightenment principles that are not inherently rooted in religion. Again, I can point you to Kant and I can point you to Rawls. And for these reasons, I would encourage you to switch your vote or stay with the affirmative side. Thank you all.
And thank you again to Finley. We will now move on to the final opening statement for the first round of the debate with our last affirmative speaker. If I could welcome Karina Maysholder to the stage.
Hi, everyone. So our side is going to focus on the bigger picture, and then we'll focus on some of the smaller details that our opponents brought up. All right. So to begin, we started with a quote: "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." Our side is saying that religion is fundamental to human existence. And again, it evolves to match our current needs. When we talk about human progress that stems from religion, we see this through how the effects of religion, how religion affects the brain, such as how it improves memory, decreases depression, increases the immune system, enhances the immune system, and reduces mortality, which further leads towards human progress. Again, we're going to see how religion is going to grow by 2050 by 3%, and as such, we will see that religion is not obstructing human progress in that way. Next, we talk about religion as a source of basic human rights. Religion is a great driver of equality, such as in many religions, treating your neighbors how you want to be treated, which is like the fundamental of a lot of these religious ideologies. Okay, and then lastly, religious communities are particularly charitable. Religious organizations give the most to charity when broken down by demographics. Highest 35% of all volunteering hours come from religious organizations, and it's because religious persons are called to care about people other than themselves, which absolutely does not obstruct human progress. We see these emphases of social justice and safeguarding of these vulnerable populations, which religion allows for the communities of persons to come together to form ideas surrounding these similar ideas. Yeah. All right, now I want to move on to my opponent's arguments about how religion limits moral inquiry. However, religion is what has led to this moral inquiry. We have this diversity of thought with persons from all of these different religions, and this has given way to these conversations happening. They also said that current religious systems are oppressive and there's lack of power of women. However, I'd like to say how in the Reformation, Protestant groups really encouraged women's education. So that's a historical example of religion encouraging women to increase their education. And currently, religion involvement increases this individual's social capital in the form of family and peer networks. And Religion should not be classified as persons who are parts of these fundamentalist groups, for they have not evolved and become part of the larger system of thinking that religious persons have. For example, in Muslim-majority countries, when family laws are based on general Islamic precepts rather than fundamentalist views, which a very small minority of Islamic persons believe, the number of women in higher education actually increases. Okay. To close, I'd just like the audience to once again reflect on how religion does not obstruct human progress. It evolves as humans need it to. It creates conversation, global diversity in thought, and promotes caring for persons other than themselves. Thank you.
And once again, thank you to all our speakers for their opening statements. We will now be entering a phase referred to sometimes as cross-examination for our two debaters. I will be opening with a question for them to deliberate upon, at which point we will be opening up to the audience for you to ask some questions to our debaters here tonight that you'd like to hear the answers to. First, I'd like to address, I'm going to start with Emily, but this will be carried out for others to have a chance to speak on it. You spoke on, in your opening, religion being used to justify colonialism and slavery and various other human rights violations. It has been brought up by the negative and just other lines of thought that this could be actions of various other systems such as governments, and it isn't necessarily reliant on religion. In this instance where something else might be using religion as an excuse, should religion still be blamed for it, or is the blame carried on to the other system that is utilizing it?
That's a great point. I guess what I was thinking is more that because the people, Europeans going in and colonizing, were of Christianity or Catholicism, they were going into places where people practiced other religions, And because of that, these people were seen as different, and this is what allowed Europeans to mistreat them, take advantage of them, abuse them because they were other, they were different. Certainly religion was intertwined with government, but religion and the fact that they were two different religions undeniably caused a lot of the mistreatment to happen. Akash has a point he'd like to make.
I'll get to that in just a second, but I would like to give the neg a chance to respond to it.
So I think, while it's easy to blame religion and make it a scapegoat, I think it's undeniable that if religion did not exist, there would be another scapegoat. If you just look at colonialism, if religion didn't exist, it's very easy to just blame race as another example. It's like a fact that white colonialists went to brown parts of the world and put them in chains, and I don't think that it's because they believed in a different God, then that was the cause of that. It was maybe like another symptom of a difference of power where South American and African colonies did not have the military experience and might that the white colonialists did. So I don't know. I think it's a little bit naive to say that if religion did not exist or that religion is the main driver of colonialism, just see slavery.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to, Akash, you said you had something you wanted to add?
Yes. Well, I would say I wish that were true. I took a history class last year, and we were going through Christopher Columbus's diary, right? And this is his account of when he first meets Native Americans. He says, I see these savages and I want to turn them into enlightened Christians, or I'm not exactly quoting him, but this is essentially what he said. So none of us are saying that religion is the only cause of colonialism, but it's an essential part of it. The motivation to convert Native Americans, Africans, to Christianity, to subjugate, to hand them the book and tell them, follow this book, otherwise you will be killed. Do you not think religion is responsible there? Are you seriously going to completely ignore these facts?
And as you ask the question, we will give you a chance to respond before we close.
Yeah, I don't think that religion is the sole responsibility of colonialism, nor a main responsibility, as you might say. like if you just look at the reason for colonialism, it's expanding the political power and the political sphere across the world, and it wasn't due to religious purposes. Colonialism was an exploration of world. I mean, if Columbus was looking for trade routes for access to more resources, then you could say that the key driver was a lack of resources. And when you went into like South American countries and saw that that there was an abundance of resources, I don't think there was much stopping him from taking that. And if he wants to use religion as a scapegoat, then fair enough. But I think that if religion was not existing in a world, it would have just been something else. It would have been race. It would have been political systems.
Thank you. Finley, you have something to say?
So 2 responses to this. The first is, even if we acknowledge that you're correct, that it's not the only cause, which we are acknowledging, it is still obstructing human progress. Even if you acknowledge that it is, say, 10% of colonialism, which we believe it's far more than 10%, then it is still obstructing human progress. The second point is that these colonialists saw themselves as saviors. The reason that they were willing to justify these atrocities is because they truly believed that if they got these pagans, these savages, to convert to Christianity, they would have an eternal afterlife. So they thought that they were trying to save them. They truly believed that they were doing them a favor by putting them in chains.
I think it's also important to mention that you guys keep on speaking in hypotheticals, saying, had religion not existed, this would have happened. But the fact of the matter is, religion does exist, and religion did exist, and for that reason, it played a major role in a lot of the subjugation that happened.
At this point, I believe we've reached a sufficient point where we should begin on the next question. I will now be opening us up to the audience. We will be saving any interns for later, assuming that there is time left. I'd like to start by asking, is there anyone who has come to watch the debate today who has a question about this topic for our debaters? I saw you first, sir. If you could address the question and who you are addressing it to.
Yeah, I was going to address it to the mediation. You guys are giving like several examples of how you don't need, or religion is necessary to have moral inquiry. Could you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I think it's the case, and I do personally believe that there are people out there who can be moral people, certainly without religion, and that's not our claim. Our claim is, however, that religion does help a lot of people, and it's no surprise that the billions of people in the world who are religious and get a lot out of religion. So while, it's not probably fair to say that if, you're not religious, then there's no way you could possibly be a moral person. Obviously, that's not the case. But it does, it truly has, it factually has added a lot to people's lives in terms of morality, and it certainly is a net benefit in that sense.
Thank you very much. Following on the change of point to the net benefit versus the inability to form a moral structure, I would like to get an opinion or a response from the affirmative side.
Could you repeat the question?
The question that was originally asked was further going into the idea that morality cannot exist without religion, and how it was responded by Alex. It was more going down the line of, as I perceived your response, that it is simply the net benefit, and while individuals may be able to have moral codes without religion, societies generally may not be able to form these same structures. Was that correct?
Yeah, or just that religion is helpful for societies to develop this moral structure.
Well, I think that religion is a tool that can be used to ask questions. I'll go back to what I said in my speech, that it stops you from asking certain questions. And even if you want to talk about modern day, right now, people using religion to ask questions, it's undeniable that throughout history, religion seriously limited moral inquiry and inquiry in general. Asking the wrong questions in, say, the 14th century could result in you being drawn and quartered or burned alive. Best case scenario, you get socially ostracized, which in itself is a punishment. So this leads to a form of self-censorship. People are afraid to ask dangerous questions because the powers that be, the religious powers that be at that time, could physically hurt them for their free speech.
All right. As we seem to have reached a conclusion on that. I will now be taking another question from the audience. Yes, you, sir. Your question and who you are addressing it to.
This has to do with both sides. This kind of piggybacks off of that idea that we just talked about. But when we talk about religion and the moral compass, it seems like we're split on, you need it to have a moral compass. You may not need it to have a moral compass. And we bring up these philosophers. The only reason that we know that what their moral compass was because they put it out there. But how can you really measure how religion is affecting a moral compass when everyday people may not be putting it out there? Maybe they haven't used it yet, been in a situation. So how can you really measure the moral compass?
How can you measure a moral compass?
And how religion affects it? You don't really. It's kind of hard to maybe analyze it.
Of course. Given that the last question was addressed towards the negative, I will give the affirmative the chance to respond first on this. If we can actually, Finley, if you'd like to respond first.
I think that we should get back to the broader discussion, because talking about an individual's moral compass, I think our opponents acknowledge that you can have a moral compass and be atheist, and you can also have a moral compass and be, say, Christian. What we're talking about when we're talking about moral inquiry is whether or not religions have influenced society to slow moral progress. And I gave the example of the Catholic Church and other religious institutions. They're always, and this is a rule, I would challenge you to find an exception to this, they are always more conservative than society at large. And so liberal principles are always more conservative than religious principles.
Thank you very much. If he would like to add something, I will give him a chance to do so, but first I would like to hear a response from the negative if you would like to offer one.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of moral inquiry and sort of general just inquiry and innovation in terms of thought throughout history, let's look at why Copernicus, Francis Bacon, Kepler, Galileo, Newton, Mendel, and Einstein were all religious to some degree. I mean, religion contributes something that all of these people who perhaps have contributed more to society, religion still adds something to them. So we're looking at people who are the most forward-thinking, people who have added more progress to our society than hardly anybody else, and yet they themselves were still religious. It's not, and I'll talk about this in my final speech, but it's really not one or the other. It's a complement. They complement each other. It adds something that they can't.
Thank you very much, Alex. Akash, you said you did have something you would like to add to the discourse.
Yes, please. It's funny you mentioned Galileo. Do you know what happened to Galileo when he said that the Earth is not at the center of the universe? He said that the Earth revolves around the sun, and he was put at he was punished with house arrest. We take the example of another scientist, Giordano Bruno. He's a famous Portuguese cosmologist and philosopher. When he said that there may be life outside the universe in 16th century, such a profound statement, he was burned at the stake. And Mendel, you again speak about Mendel. So my point is that religious individuals can contribute to progress, but the institutions do not seem to reflect those ideas, do not seem to help promote those ideas. Mendel, for example, he was a bishop, I think. He's the father of genetics. If we all know here what the church and other religious institutions think about evolution and genetics. They just completely reject it. A lot of them do. So, and responding to your question, one way to look at moral progress is just to see at historical facts, right? So, if religious institutions, ideologies had all the answers, then why did it take them thousands of years to say slavery is wrong? To say that, oh, wait a minute, I think women are also people. Or to say, oh, maybe we should not stone homosexuals to death. Like, looking at these facts, and going back to the statement which Karina made, which is religion has led to moral inquiry.
Thank you, Akash, but we actually have to, you've made points about the difference between, and I do want to touch more on the point that you brought up, the difference between individual progress and how it affects society, and I would like to, before we close out on the question, give the negative one more chance to speak. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's easy for both sides really to pick up very specific instances of like injustices. For example, if we said slavery, a secular act, was an example of how a lack of religion can create these like injustices. That would not really be true, and for the same reason, they're picking up very specific instances where we agree that injustices did occur. But the fact is, like, the vast majority of people that practice various religions actually don't believe the fundamentalist and extremist points of view that sometimes can be taken literally in some of these religious texts. And before my time is up, I'd like to close this point with a quote that we actually said in our first speech, which was, "Social change undermines religions which don't accommodate it." And I think this is really important because as the society progresses, so does religion. And the warrant for this is that we've had religion for almost the whole duration of mankind. And Pope Francis himself warns that if the Catholic Church does not catch up with social progress, the Catholic Church will become a museum. And so I think this really is a key point in our debate because it proves that social change progresses regardless of religion. And therefore, you can infer that religion does not obstruct social progress or the progress of mankind in general, because if social change is able to happen regardless of religion, it seems that religion is the one that has to catch up.
Thank you very much, Diego. Now, we do only have time for the cross-examination for roughly one more question. Yes, sir. Your question and who it is directed.
So it's directed to the negative. So essentially, you mentioned that religion is really fundamental to humans. So how far back do you think that we began to adopt religion? And are you implying that we evolved to have religion in our brains? How far back, essentially? And I would also like to give the positive talk about it.
I don't think I'm qualified to say how far back humans have had religion. But what I do want to say is that I think a key point I want to stress is that religion actually evolves with humankind. And what we said in our first speech was that a neuroscientist has actually studied the effect of religion on the brain. And while I don't know if this is an evolutionary trait or a trait that has always existed in humans, I do want to say that having a religion has actual tangible effects on like the brain and how we perceive like religious figures. And what I was talking about in my last speech is that religion is evolving with social progress. I mean, we've had religions before. I think Jediism was in 2001 was polled at almost 400,000 people in the UK were practicing it. And while I know this is a comical example, we brought up new religions that are have been created recently, such as climatology, dataism, and transhumanism, which is just proof that if religion does not evolve, another religion is going to take its place, in another one, and it's going to evolve with our ideologies so that religion is essentially inevitable in the human experience.
Thank you. I do want to touch and give an opportunity for Af to respond to the point you brought up at the end, that religion does evolve with us, which is part of, maybe on more of a social evolutionary than biological evolutionary scale, but I would like to hear what the Af has to say about that.
So I acknowledge that religion evolves along with society, and society is moving forward regardless of religion, and I agree with that point, but that doesn't mean that religion isn't stopping it. If someone is walking forward carrying a giant load that is slowing them down, and yet they are still progressing towards their goal, yes, they are still progressing, but the giant load that they are carrying, the backpack, for example, that weighs 100 pounds, is still slowing them down. I would use this analogy to describe religion. Religion, again, society is moving faster than religion. That's why we have new religions that are being created, and that's why the Catholic Church is going to turn into a museum unless it evolves. I'd also like to point out that our opponents are saying that fundamentalists today make up a very small percentage of religious people, but fundamentalist views now were normal among religious people 200, 300, 400 years ago. And so if we're looking over the course of history and you talk about fundamentalist views right now, those views were very normal, say 200 years ago.
Just like a small point, I think it's important to go back to our resolution. The resolution is religion obstructs human progress, not religion stops human progress. So even though human progress happens regardless, the motion is obstructs or hinders, in other words.
Thank you very much. And I'm afraid that will be all the time we have for cross-examination at the moment. We'll be moving on to the third and final segment of our debate, the closing statements. There will be one from each side. We will begin with the affirmative closing statement from Erisaid Nunez.
Okay, hi everyone. I'd like to thank you all once again for joining us here today, and I would also like to thank the Santa Clara team for taking part in this debate. While there were definitely good points on both sides, we encourage the audience to vote for us. Over the course of this debate, we have demonstrated that religious institutions have halted scientific methodology, religious institutions discourage moral inquiry, and religious institutions have significantly restricted women's rights. All of these issues that we have mentioned today are absolutely crucial for human progress to take place, and our opposition has argued a lot on individuality. Religion helps memory, it helps funding to charities and different things like that, but they keep on focusing on individual how religion helps individuals, and we're here to focus on how religion helps human progress and human society as a whole. As we have expressed throughout the entirety of this debate is on balance. That is, religion obstructs human progress more than it benefits it. That is not to say that religion has not benefited humanity on occasion, just that when all things have been taken into consideration, human progress has been harmed as a consequence of religious institutions. Religious institutions have been the most influential throughout history. Therefore, they should be prioritized throughout this debate. We're talking about factors that have the greatest impact on human progress, and individual religious beliefs have impacted society less than far-reaching institutions that have propagated those beliefs. Scriptures interpreted and made into real-world actions by these institutions. So in order to debate how religion has influenced progress, we have to prioritize the impact of these institutions. Our team takes this debate seriously, and as such, we have recognized the importance of prioritizing the impact of these institutions, while our opposition has chosen to minimize these impacts. We are not saying that religious institutions are bad, that religious institutions have never contributed towards progress, nor that they don't have the ability to contribute towards progress in the future. But if we as a society want to move towards progress, we must first address the problems that are keeping us from that progress. It is near impossible to fix a problem if one does not recognize that a problem exists. Therefore, I urge you to vote for us, the affirmative, and take a small step towards progress. Thank you.
Another big thank you for the affirmative as they close out their case. We will now be hearing the last speaker for the evening, the closing statement for the negative. If I could welcome once again back to the podium, Alex Rentz.
If you don't vote for us, you'll all burn in hell. Just kidding. Okay, thanks again to everybody. Okay, I'm going to start my time now. So I think that this resolution really boils down to the question, does religion contribute to our movement forward, or does it somehow hold us back? Now, I mentioned during the cross-examination, I questioned why were all these very successful scientists and innovators all religious? And I said it's because religion adds something that even they couldn't contribute. I think this is a really important thing, because when they bring up moral inquiry, this really has existed without, religious people have been able to inquire into moral considerations, scientific considerations, and technological considerations with religion. And then in terms of the violence and wars, we argue that they were not unique to religion. And there's a lot of examples to back this up. The Three Kingdoms in China, the Mongol conquests, Stalin, the Soviet Union, Mao's revolution, each of these killed tens of millions of people and were not religious. And even more recent examples like the Rwandan ethnic cleansing or not because of religious reasons. In fact, the Encyclopedia of Wars says that only 7% of wars have religion as their primary reason. The common thread is really more often political, ethnic, racial differences, and we don't like that because of hardwired reasons into our biology. Religion is not religious conflict. Religion is not discrimination. It's not sexism. And I think that they're missing the point about what religion really is. Religion is what billions of people have turned to in order to find meaning, fulfillment, morality, and community. Now, of course, people tied to religion have committed atrocities, and obviously religion institutions are imperfect. Now, these incidents have not plagued these incidents are not because specifically of the religious institutes. They're faults within humans. And the fact that, like, for example, the discrimination against women, the unfortunate reason, as my partner brought up, is that women have been discriminated against from the beginning of time, even before religion was really a prominent factor. And religion, in many ways, was able to provide an answer to this. Like, Mary was idolized, Mother Teresa is idolized, and there's a lot of support for women that can be found in religious institutes today. Religion does not obstruct human progress because it was never designed to oppose it. That's the fundamental message, that a belief in something beyond oneself, a moral compass that helps to guide our motivations, the sense of fulfillment and selflessness that results, is why religion has and always will add to humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. That will conclude the speaking portion of the debate. I will be calling Marnie up in a second to do another tally so we could finish the Kahoot to see who won. But first, I'd just like another round of applause for all of our visiting debaters and our debaters here at home. Ted?
So Marty's going to come back up here and let you guys know how to do your second vote. And while you are voting, I'm going to make a few more announcements because it's going to take a couple minutes to do. But we'll also be announcing the raffle. So Marty, come on up and let everyone know how they should be logging out.
Hey guys, so it's basically the same thing you did for the beginning of the vote. So log back on to kahoot.it, so
KAHOOT.IT. And then it's the same code, so the code's 518600. 518600. Is everyone there? Raise your hand if you're not. Okay, rad. I'm going to start the voting. And it's the same thing. So the triangle's affirmative, the diamond's negative, and the circle's undecided.
Do you want to repeat which side is which?
Yes. Negative, affirmative. Anybody need help? Cool. Okay. Thank you.
So I'm going to make a few announcements. I do want to just say one more time, this is a really easy topic for people to get very heated about and very personal about. And I was really kind of impressed with how all of our debaters remain really civil and stuck to really great dialogue. So thank you guys very much for that. So just a few more announcements. I want to announce that we have a few events coming up in the spring. We'll be hosting a high school tournament for the high schools in the state. In January, we're going to be hosting a President's Day debate where our interns are going to take on the persona of whoever happens to be left in the Democratic primaries, and also one of our interns will be playing Donald Trump. So you can come and you can watch them take on those personas and watch what those debates will look like in the fall. Nice and early. We'll also be doing a debate on privacy rights in March and a special marijuana debate on 421 because we didn't want to do it on 420 itself because we wanted people to be able to vote with a clear head. I want to now pull out the raffle. So to get out your raffle tickets and we'll tell you who our two winners are for the night. Okay, our first raffle ticket is 8 865-269. 865-269. Who's got that? And our second winner is 865-297. 865-297. Awesome. All right, come up afterwards, and we will make sure that we give you your Starbucks gift cards. And Marnie, how's the voting going?
Oh, give me like 2 more seconds.
2 more seconds for the voting, but we can absolutely write the pre-debate vote down right now. Now you want to come and do that? I'll remind our audience members the way that the winner of the debate is determined is by who ends up swaying the audience the most rather than who ends up gaining the most votes. So we will now show you what the beginning and end votes are. Do you have the tallies?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the beginning vote was, for the affirmative side, we had 29%, the negative had 26%, and there was 46% undecided. Sorry. And then by the end of the debate, 79% was for the AF, 17% was for the neg, and 6% were still undecided. So, affirms.
Thank you, Naya. Thank you again to our debaters. Congratulations to our winners. We'll be having a reception on the roof of General Benz if anybody would like to come and join. And if you didn't get a chance to ask a question, want to argue more with our debaters, you are welcome to harass them while we are all trying to enjoy ourselves. So you're welcome to come do that. Thank you very much for coming out. And please join us for the Regents Cup on November 16th. Thank you very much.